The first thing that I did before permanently moving from London, UK to Medellín, Colombia was I made sure I had visited Colombia often enough before the move. In total, I visited Colombia around 3 times for a grand total of 2.5 months or 10 weeks. The very first trip being my whistle-stop tour of Colombia where I went to Bogota, Medellín, Cali, all the major cities. The second time I spent a couple of weeks here before going to Peru on a holiday. And the third time I spent a month over Christmas here to experience Colombia at Christmas time. Now, this might sound really obvious to some of you, but I wanted to make sure that I had spent enough time in the city that I was deciding to live in before making the decision to permanently move, because I wanted an idea of what it's like to spend time here, what the climate is like, how people interact with each other, how the city feels, how I can kind of get around with my limited Spanish. And 2.5 months or 10 weeks like I spent here before was enough time for me to get a good grasp of the city. It by no means meant that I was an expert on Medellín before I moved, but on the other hand, I wasn't coming here completely on a blank canvas knowing nothing at all about what it's like to live here. So that's the first point. I made sure that I'd spent enough time, 2.5 months, living in Medellín before I made it a permanent move. Now, the second thing I did was I learned some Spanish. By no means I am fluent now, and I wasn't fluent 8 months ago when I moved here, but in London I was taking 3 or 4 classes per day online with a Spanish teacher who was from Colombia, so I started to learn the dialect of Colombian Spanish, a little bit of slang, the accent, that kind of thing. I watched TV shows in Spanish, particularly Colombian TV shows, which are really good, by the way, in Spanish with English subtitles on, and this really helped me to kind of get my ear in with regards to listening to Spanish, understanding what people say, the kind of words they use, the phrases they use, tone of voice, all that kind of stuff. I got the Spanish keyboard on my iPhone, and so when I would talk to my Latino or Colombian friends in London, of which there are many, I would write to them on my iPhone with a Spanish keyboard, which prevented any annoying autocorrect mistakes. I basically tried to integrate myself as much as realistically possible when I was in London into learning Spanish, because it is possible to live in Medellín knowing absolutely zero Spanish, but not only are you being a bit rude and not integrating into their culture, it also massively limits on what you can do in the country if you don't know any Spanish. You're kind of limited to gringo events, non-Spanish speaking events. You can't integrate with the locals. You can't have a quick kind of 30-second chit-chat with your neighbor in your apartment building. So that's the second point. I made sure I had a basic understanding of Spanish, at least conversational, so I could have a basic conversation with people. I could order things in a restaurant or in a cafe. I could kind of hold my own for a good minute or two in a taxi talking to a taxi driver. And for me, this is really important. That being said, my Spanish improved massively after I moved here, because the complete integration into the culture without speaking any English when you're out and about really helps with your Spanish learning. So that's the second point. I made sure I learned a little bit of Spanish, and I kind of did my due diligence with regards to lessons when I was in London to prepare me for my permanent move here. The third point is I did my own research. So like you guys are doing now, you're watching YouTube videos, you're watching my content and learning about what it's like to live in Colombia, in Medellín. I did exactly the same. I followed a bunch of YouTubers. I did my own research. I spoke to my Colombian friends in London about what it was like to live here, because I found there was always a bit of a difference from what people used to say online about living in Colombia and Medellín in particular, and what my actual Colombian friends who are from here as well would say to me in real life. So for me, it was important that I did my own research online and in person about what it's like to live here. What are the routines like? What kind of times do people get up? What are the facilities like in the city? What are the pros? What are the cons? Because it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a big international move, and you're just looking at all the upsides without looking at the downsides at all. And if you watch my last video, I went through 5 downsides of living in Medellín, Colombia, some of which I did not know before I moved here. So that's the third point. I did my own research. I made sure I got my information from a variety of different sources so that I had a somewhat educated opinion about what it was like, what it would be like to live here as a British expat with kind of limited Spanish speaking abilities. The fourth thing I did before moving here was I spent quality time with family and friends before I left. And interestingly, I probably spent more time with the people closest around me before I made the move than I would have done otherwise, because there is nothing like a hard deadline. It kind of forced me and some of my friends and members of my family to meet up. We'd hang out, we'd spend quality time together before my big move. And it was really great, because we made lots of nice memories before I made the trip over. And I was completely aware of the fact that I wouldn't see them for a while. And so, yeah, there was nothing like a deadline to whip people into action, to make people do things that they wouldn't normally do otherwise. And so that was the fourth thing I did. I knew that I wouldn't see my family and friends for a while. So before I made the move, we set aside time for Buenos Dias. We set aside some time to hang out, spend quality time together, and it was really great, honestly. And the last thing I did before permanently moving was I made sure I had a plan B. I was fully confident that my plan A, moving to Colombia, was going to work out and it would pan out because I'd done my research. I already had an idea of what it would be like to live here. I was fed up of living in the UK. I wanted to change, but you always have to prepare for the worst case scenario with these things. And so I did have a plan B. My plan B was going to be either move back to the UK, sell my apartment and buy a cheaper one without a mortgage, or I was going to find another country in Latin America to go and kind of travel around, visit a little bit, because I had flexibility. The beauty of having a British passport is you have visa-free access to a lot of countries in Latin America for up to 3 months. So if my Colombia plan didn't pan out for whatever reason, you never know how things are going to work out, I would go and check out another country in Latin America, maybe Guatemala, which I've been to a month before, maybe Mexico, maybe Brazil, start learning Portuguese. So I just made sure I had a plan B and very vaguely a plan C, just in case my Colombia idea didn't pan out. Because I actually did the same thing 10 years ago. I moved to Australia and it just didn't pan out after 6 months, so I came back home. So in my head, it was always good to have a backup plan, a plan B, in case the Colombia idea didn't work out how I'd have liked it to. So there you have it, guys. 5 things that I did when I was in London to prepare me for my permanent move to Medellín, Colombia. Catch you in the next video.